everybody. Sorry for the late start today on our Leadership Forum live stream. I'm going to be adding Jesse in here. Hope you guys are having a great Wednesday so far, and let us know how your week's going. It's actually going really well here in Albuquerque. It's, as you can tell from the glare all over me, sunny today, which is nice because it's been very dreary lately. So very nice to get some sun. I am just right now, hey Megan, I am just grabbing the permalink and sharing it all the places. And hopefully, hey Jen, I see you're watching too. So hopefully we'll be able to get this going. Join us for the live stream. How's everybody doing today? Comment and give me a hello if you're watching. And here comes Jesse. Today we wanted to talk about finding your thought leadership voice. And this is one of those things. Hey, Jesse.
Hi.
How's
it going?
Good. Got it going. I was having some tech difficulties. Let's see. I'm just posting this on all the places.
Cool. I was listening very briefly from my computer before I hopped on my phone, and you were a little quiet, just FYI.
Oh,
so
interesting.
you might need to speak up.
Am I still
or
quiet?
Or if anyone... No, I can hear you fine from my headphones. So if you guys, hey Megan, hey Teresa, if you guys are having trouble hearing either myself or Marie, just let us know if we're a little quiet. Hey James, thanks for joining.
I'm excited you're here because I know you said you have trouble this time. So yeah, you're here. Yay, okay, now you're sharing all the places, aren't you?
I am.
Good. Awesome. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about a messaging related thing for thought leaders. I mean, sounds like us, right? By the way, I have like my blanket up around me. I just realized it's like totally visible because I'm like freezing.
I've got mine on my lap too. It's all good.
Whatever. Just owning it. And this is all about finding your voice, but in the capacity of a thought leader, right? So we talk about voice a lot because we struggled with this. This is something that I especially had trouble with because I was coming from these nonprofit sort of corporate spheres where I was really focused on sounding professional, what I thought a professional should sound like. I've actually had this conversation with some of you before. Uh-oh. James says the picture is frozen, but the sound is going. Hopefully, the rest of you guys let us know if the picture's frozen for us too. I don't know what we'll do about it, but just so that we know. Hopefully it froze with us not making a crazy face. But yeah, I really struggled to A, let go of what I thought I should sound like, and B, I struggled to then, like, once I felt like I could let go, figure out even like what I should sound like. And this is just as an entrepreneur, right? Like all I was trying to do was just like help my clients in my small sphere. And it turns out that like when you step into a thought leadership role, I've been seeing some conversations and participating in some conversations this week about like the responsibility that comes with that, you know, around like living up to being vulnerable and being yourself and sharing with people openly and storytelling and like all of this important mantle of thought leadership stuff. And it turns out that like, it's actually even more important as a thought leader to know how to embrace your voice, how to find it, you know, how to use it. So, yeah, we wanted to talk about that today. Like what's the benefit? why find your voice as a thought leader? What is holding you back? How to identify that and how to overcome that. And then also we'll give you a few little actionable steps, what you can do right now to embrace your thought leadership voice. Yeah. And then we'll be giving you kind of a recap of what we've been doing up until now for thought leadership and then what it's going to look like going forward for the next month or so. Cause we've been on this journey with you guys for about a month now. It feels like a lot longer than
Lots
that.
of exciting things.
Yes.
I know. I'm kind of loving it. And I'm kind of loving that we're getting together once a week to talk with you guys about these things because, as we've mentioned before, your participation in the conversation is important to us. We want this to be a dialogue, not just between me and Marie, but between all of us in this entire community.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about things like voice. So even before Marie and I started talking a lot about thought leadership, voice was always one of the big topics that came up with our clients, with guest expert sessions that we ran. Our very first opt-in that was successful.
Thank you, James.
Our very first opt-in that we used to grow our list was a copywriting character quiz, which was all about how to find your voice as an entrepreneur. And I think it's because the reason we gravitated towards that was because it comes up as a problem with so many people who are coming out of corporate, coming out of education, coming out of careers where they didn't feel like they could fully embrace themselves. So Marie said, she came out of this corporate environment. I came out of an education environment where it wasn't so much about sounding stodgy, but it was very much about protecting what you said because you don't want to get in trouble with parents. You don't want to get in trouble with administration. Heaven forbid you should have a single swear word on your public Facebook account because parents might see that. I remember back when I was in the classroom, I had 2 Facebook accounts. I had the one that my students or the administration would be able to see some public information just to know I existed as a human being. And then I had my private one that was where I could actually talk about things. And so when I shifted into entrepreneurship full time, it was really hard for me to drop that facade of here is teacher Jessie. Here is the polite Jessie who's very PC and very much not making waves, even when she has strong beliefs because of the backlash that it could bring from being an educator, which says a whole thing about the education system, but that's a different conversation. But it made it really hard for me to find my voice. Which is why that was one of the things I gravitated towards first as an entrepreneur because I was really good at helping other people find their voice. That came naturally to me, but finding my own, I got stuck. So
me too.
Yeah, I think everyone does. Yeah, drop a comment if you've ever had trouble finding your voice, if you've ever felt caught up in what you feel like you should sound like, or just old habits from corporate or wherever you were before entrepreneurship, where you sort of trained yourself to sound a certain way and that didn't feel authentic. Let us know in the comments if you've had that experience and what it looks like for you, because I'm kind of curious to see. I know we all come from a bunch of different backgrounds, so I'm sure everyone's experience is a little different.
Yeah, totally. And hey, Jen, thanks for joining. So one of the reasons I think that this is pertinent to bring up is because entrepreneurs are creating businesses, right? And like a lot of times we'll have teams, we'll have people supporting us. We aren't the only person. It's not always about a personal brand. And so it's still kind of easy to hide behind the we corporate speak for entrepreneurs. And sometimes it's appropriate, potentially, or it's just like where someone's at. But when it comes to thought leadership, it's a little bit more imperative. Actually, I'd say it's imperative for entrepreneurship too. I think that like they are allowed to see the human side of things, but it's really, really important for a thought leader to be able to be themselves and be open because it really is about a personal message. Even more so than it is about entrepreneurship, because as thought leaders, we're trying to create forward movement within other people. But in order to do so, we have to own our own stories, own our own confusion, own our own stuff we're working through, our own process, our vulnerability, our messiness, in order to allow other people to feel normalized that they're going through the process as well, so that they feel like they can also move forward and achieve. And there's a lot of good comments coming up.
Yeah. So Megan is sympathizing with my teacher experiences. She used her first and middle name on Facebook so she could hide from parents, but still very much censored herself. Learning how to shed Miss Lamb and become Megan was such a difficult transition. Totally feel you on that. It's hard. And you taught elementary, right? So it was probably even harder. I at least taught high school where they were a little rougher around the edges. So I could let myself be a little looser with them than perhaps in an elementary position.
Yeah, for sure. Teresa totally relates. She says, corporate speak. I was there a year ago. Totally. And I think too, right, like knowing you, Teresa, and a lot of your clients probably are also stuck in corporate speak. And so it's sort of just easy
Mm-hmm.
to be like, well, this is their language and I'm embracing it. But I think you've actually done a really beautiful job of like meshing them and their comfort level and like what their language is with you and your language. And it's not an easy thing
Mm-hmm.
to do. So kudos on that. James has a couple of comments here. Oh, yes, we are our own biggest blind spots. So true. Preach
Yep.
it. It's not easy to know what we're supposed to sound like, even when we identify with other voices that we like. And that is scary. Being yourself is sometimes the hardest thing to be. There's so much truth in that. And also, there's something really interesting about like what we're supposed to sound like, right? That's that whole like
Mm-hmm.
should thing that I'm ever since I heard Cambo and Bliss say should is shit, I'm like, yeah, she's right. Like every time we hear supposed to or should, like doesn't mean it's wrong, but it means like it's an opportunity for us to like inspect that a little bit, right? And see like, and I think also your point, James, about like we interact with other people who have voices that we
Mm-hmm.
admire or that we want to reflect. And that may help us get closer to our own voice and kind of start shedding some of the shoulds. But at the end of the day, like if we start mimicking them too, like now we're just parroting someone else. So it's can
Mm-hmm.
be a process. It's the end of the day. Like it's a process to find your own voice, and it can be very scary. And that's sort of where we're going after this conversation about the benefits of finding your voice as a thought leader.
Jen says, my day job is in local government, old school, living in fear of saying anything wrong. Don't put anything in the email. It's nuts.
Yeah.
I don't fit in. I'm too authentic.
Yay.
I think a lot of people who start doing their own thing, that's one of the big reasons, right? So a lot of people talk about feeling stifled by the jobs that they had before entrepreneurship or the jobs they currently have, but have led them to create their own business or their own thought leadership platform. And I think a lot of times part of that stifled feeling is circumstance, like I'm pulling 90-hour weeks working for someone else. But I think part of it is that your voice is stifled too. You know, you feel like you can't fully be yourself and you're stuck in a job where you spend most of your time not being yourself. And that wears on you after time. So sort of transitioning into the benefits of finding your voice, this is also the benefit of finding your voice and creating a platform where you can use your voice. You get to be yourself. You get to not feel stifled. I think that's a huge benefit, and it's hard, but once that transition is made and once you get comfortable with your own voice, it's this opportunity. It's like this weight off your shoulders, right? Like, I can be myself now.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing feeling.
It is, but I think, and like Jen saying, like they can just deal with me as I am, which is awesome. But like, how
Mm-hmm.
much time has it taken you, and like frustration and like hand wringing to like get to the point where you're like boldly just saying like, "This is me,"
Mm-hmm.
like deal. I know if you're like me, it took a long time, and honestly, I never got to that point when I was working a corporate nonprofit job. Like it took for me to actually get my own business being a full-time thing and like being required to just work outside of word of mouth or like people I already knew, and like suddenly I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm being visible in front of like internet strangers and I don't know how to talk to them. I don't know how to talk, period. Like I think part of this too is just it shines a light on the fact that like as human beings who are like socially normalized, we have social intelligence, right? And so like naturally reflect the people we're talking with. So if we're
Mm-hmm.
giving a presentation in front of a bunch of CEOs who are all sort of using corporate speak, the temptation is going to be there to reflect that back to them, right? Whereas like if we're hanging out here with you guys, we know you already, like we probably had a coffee chat with every single one of you at some point or another, like we're just talking. And so it's really easy to like do that in these sort of small, more intimate spaces and more comfortable spaces. But the
Mm-hmm.
challenge is when, as a thought leader or as a leader in general, we're still embracing this sort of comfortable messaging and voice, even when we don't know who we're talking to or who's
Totally, yeah.
listening. Yeah.
Jen
Yeah.
says, oh yeah, it was a process, partly because I am in a male environment and had to throw off cultural stuff. Women getting
Mm,
treated differently, shouldn't speak up, etc. Yeah, that's a huge piece of it, right?
yeah.
And there are a lot of different cultural components. There's the male-dominated workplace. There's the, like my experience of the educational workplace, where there are certain, it's female-dominated, but there are certain cultural norms that you're expected to follow. There's like corporate expectations, so many different expectations that you walk into a job and, you have to kind of meet those expectations to get hired. And within your first few years of working there, you kind of have to play the game or feel like you have to. And
That.
that's one of those shoulds, right?
Yes.
That's one of those shoulds because
Yes.
you're like, oh shit, I could get fired. So it takes a while to get comfortable. I always sort of told myself in jobs, like it takes me a good 2 years before I'm comfortable being myself in a job, because I have to sort of test things and like figure out how far I can push the line. But even then, I'm never fully embracing myself. I'm embracing
Yeah.
that work version of me.
So what you're
Jane
doing
says
is
90 hours, get out of that city.
agreed.
Yeah, that's why I'm not a teacher anymore.
But this whole 2 year thing, right? Like that's interesting because that's a story you've told
Mm-hmm.
yourself about like how
Right,
long it takes
yeah,
you to
totally.
assimilate or like to get to the point where like you're okay enough for them. Super
And they're not going to
interesting.
judge me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I feel like we keep going towards part two, but let's go ahead and talk about benefits so that we can get to part two, which is like
Yes,
what's holding
yes.
people
Okay,
back. So why do you
right.
want to do
So
this?
benefit number one was that you don't feel stifled when you have your own voice. Benefit number two is that you stand out. When you use your own voice, people are able to recognize who you are. And I think that this is a big problem sometimes specifically in the entrepreneurship sphere, potentially in the thought leadership sphere as well, because a lot of times people start on one end of the spectrum in super corporate speak, and then they're like, oh, I have to sound like myself. So they go to the other side of the spectrum where they're trying to be super disruptive by dropping F-bombs all the time and being super in your face. But that type of marketing has kind of gotten overdone in some ways. And that might not be your voice either. If it is, that's great, and you can make it your authentic version of yourself. But I think there's like a testing period where you're swinging back and forth between the old you and the real you, and you have to figure out what the real you is. But once you do, that's the sweet spot where you're able to stand out because your message is truly authentic, the way you talk is truly connecting to people, and you don't have to like censor yourself or try to push yourself further than is comfortable.
Yeah, I feel like it takes a lot of pressure off, right? Because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
this is who I am, kind of take it or leave it. And I really do feel like for those who are like, but you don't want to upset people, I feel like that's coming from a place of like lack mentality. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's enough to go around. We as individuals connect with people in ways that other people can't, who maybe sort of on the surface are competitors, right? Like I know James, you and we all three had this conversation at one point about like, we may look like we do the same thing as someone else, but there's reasons that someone would hire you as opposed to a competitor and vice versa, right? And a lot of that comes down to
Mm-hmm.
voice. Not all of it. Some of it comes down to values or like what are your offers or all that kind of stuff. But a lot of that is grounded
Right.
in that whole like internal, introspective, like feeling comfortable with yourself place.
Right.
And the other thing about
So
it
there's another
too,
benefit.
yeah,
You attract the right people.
totally. And when they get on the phone with you or whatever, and they want to like deepen the relationship, they're not suddenly surprised by how you sound because on your website you sound very like, straight laced, and all of a sudden you're on the phone just like hanging out and it's super comfortable, and they're like, oh, this is not what I expected at all. One of the like most fun things I found about hanging out with people in our circles in person is to see like who sounds like I expected them to sound and who doesn't. Most people do. But I think it's because they've gotten to that place where they're comfortable. So it would be interesting to
Mm-hmm.
see like early on when someone's still feeling it out, like how does that shake out? The other piece I think is that you're able to create a platform that feels comfortable for the long haul. So it feels sustainable, because if you feel like you put on a mask at the beginning, you kind of feel like you have to sustain that somehow or like explain it if you
Mm-hmm.
change. And so if you're just going into it as you from the beginning, you're able to create a sustainable feel good platform from the beginning. Yeah,
Don't
don't
try to
try to
out Gary V. Gary V. Yeah, don't do that. I'm
Yeah,
like, I
but the
know,
world
like some
doesn't
of
need two
you,
of them. Yeah.
they need one view. Yeah, and like we're
Yeah.
not necessarily poo-pooing on like people who go from the super corporate to like that really confrontational type of messaging. Like I know Megan's watching this and Megan loves her fucks. She loves to use that in her copy and it works for her. I know that sounded bad, but sorry, Megan. But when we were working with you, Megan, on your copy, that was one of the things we were talking about, right? Was when do we use the word fuck in copy and when does it make sense? And it actually made sense for you because it fits with your brand and it fits with your voice. And it's not like you're trying to be Gary Vee, it's you're trying to be Megan Lamb.
Yeah.
Megan says, I had someone tell me at a discovery call she liked my website because I swear. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's you.
And I
And
like
it's
that.
you in a really authentic way.
Yeah. And I like that you say too, like, I actually censor myself on my website. But I think that's that whole like social intelligence piece, right? Like we still like want to make sure that like we're ourselves, but we're also responding to other people because it is a two-way conversation and just sort of standing on a pedestal without being responsive or empathetic or paying attention to like the response that we're getting back just means that we're not necessarily as emotionally intelligent as we could be. So
Right.
I think that's the distinction, right? Is like it's not about sacrificing who we are, but it is about like also listening and making them feel heard. Yeah, and going back to James'
Yeah, it's
other
that bridge,
point,
right?
right? Yeah, yeah.
You have to
love that
build a bridge
analogy.
between yourself and your audience because if you're just using your voice with no regard for what your audience is saying on their end, then they might not completely get you and what you're saying and why you're saying it. But if you take you and mingle it in with them and what they're saying and what their desires and fears and wants and hopes and dreams are, that's when you build a bridge between your voice and their desires. And that allows
Yeah,
you to have that really authentic, candid conversation.
totally. I love this quote that James put down here. We're not looking for the best people, we're looking for the right ones.
Mm-hmm.
So true, right? So I think that's, just to reiterate the benefits, I think that's the most important one, right? Is that like the right people are going to find you. You're going to find the right people,
Mm-hmm.
and your thought leadership platform and your message as an entrepreneur and as a thought leader can connect with the right people, and everyone can feel really good about the relationship. So hopefully, I think a lot of you guys have been in our circles for a while, so you know that like how we feel about voice. But it sounds great, right? But like all of a sudden there's all these like reasons people don't do it, or it takes them a while
Mm-hmm.
before they start embracing it. So we're going to segue a little bit here into the next part of today's chat, which is about what holds people back. So one of the things I
Mm-hmm.
think that we already sort of touched on is these stories that we tell ourselves. We create it based on like what's happened to us in the past or things that we've heard from other people. We create significance around realities that aren't actually realities. You hear this a lot with like money mindset work, right? Like, what's your money story? Well, I think there's a voice story too, right? That like we have hangups around like embracing our voice too fast, or like the dangers of embracing our voice. Yeah, there are dangers. I think they're worth it. But like we tell ourselves like the world is going to fall apart and my business can't be successful and I won't be able to have a movement and I won't be able to impact people's lives if I'm me, because that's not good enough or because it's not connecting enough or whatever. I get excited and I throw this around. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, I hear that a lot. I heard it in my own brain a lot. And so just like kind of want to like throw that out there that if you're in a place where you're feeling that right now, like take some time to look at like maybe what are the roots of that story? Like what does it come from? Does it come from an experience you had or like something your parents told you when you were growing up? Like I had stories around writers and our ability to like have financial impact or whatever it is in the world. And so like that would hold me back. And so I'd play it safe. Right.
Totally.
Yeah. There's a lot of stories.
Yeah.
If you're feeling like you want to share one of your stories, feel free to pop it in the chat.
Well, I think it all comes back to like all those stories are rooted in fear. I think fear is sort of the common denominator of what holds people back from sharing their voice, but that fear takes so many different shapes. So it can take the shape of fear of judgment. It can take the shape of past stories that we've told ourselves. I'll never forget, from grade 3, I wanted to be a writer, and I told everybody I'm going to be a writer when I grow up. And I will never forget my father telling me, "That's amazing. What's your plan B? Because plan A probably ain't going to work out." And he didn't mean it in a like, I'm going to try and like keep you from pursuing your dreams way, but he meant it in a protective way of make sure you have a backup plan. And that always stuck with me as, oh, well, maybe I can't do this. Maybe I can't step into my voice and speak my truth and talk about the things that I'm passionate about, especially through the medium that makes the most sense for me, which is words. And I think there are a lot of things, a lot of fears that people latch onto when they are challenged with coming into their voice. If I had $1 for every time I've heard "What's your money story?" I'd have a much different money story.
See, that's interesting because I didn't hear that until much later, right? But like it opened my eyes to the fact that I had stories about a lot of things, not just money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it was all fear-based, right? And like the fact that your father said that out of protection, and that's what you got out of it, is like, oh, my dad loves me and he wants to protect me. But like probably also you didn't recognize that like that was coming out of a place of fear for him, right? And a place of lack.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like, and a place of like, I need to make sure that all of my children are in a financially secure and, you know, contributing members of society position.
Right. Which is
even
like
from a very young age.
Aspiration for your kids, right? Like we want our kids to like love their lives and feel productive and like feel like they're making a difference.
Responsible adults.
Yeah.
And they probably also don't want their kids living in their basement forever. Like that's legitimate.
That's probably part of it. Right. But
when you make that transition, it's so hard. It's so scary to be like, I'm not going to listen to those stories. Yeah. Instead, I'm going to embrace my voice and the fears that come up around that, which is that fear of judgment that I mentioned earlier, that fear of not belonging, of I think Rochelle said this in an earlier comment in our Facebook group. She said something to the effect of like a fear of being a leader with no followers. Mm-hmm. And that like, oh, that hit me right here. Doesn't because it? I think that's because I think that's such a common fear.
Yeah. And my response to her was like, you already have a rabid base. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. And I think part of the reason that's happened is because you've been you and like you've allowed the sort of onion layers to fall away so that like your people see the real you. If you catch us on the replay, Rochelle, we're totally talking about you in the most loving, praiseworthy way. The other piece of that too that I thought was really interesting, and I think Rochelle touched on this and somebody else did too, I can't remember who it was, but it was about responsibility and about like, what if I'm wrong about something? And like the responsibility that comes with it, I think is really great because it shows that like we take it seriously, this charge of like, I want to stand up as a leader. Like, it's great that you take it seriously. Like we do too. But like, it's also okay to mess up. I think so long as we own it, right? Like so long as we own it, use it as a teachable moment or use it as like sort of a transparency piece or something that like we can wrap this into our message. And I don't know if we want to go as far as like, I've heard about people, they'll make like a mistake in their email and they'll like write back and be like, oh, oops, I messed up. But sometimes they'll actually like intentionally screw something up because those oops, I messed up emails actually have a high open rate because people want to know, right? But I think what's really
and then it becomes a marketing tactic.
Yeah, so I don't think we need to go there because that's icky. But I do think that there's something really interesting about the fact that like there is a high open rate for those because people want to see like the human side of things. People want to see like what we can learn from errors and past mistakes.
Yeah, that's so true. And I feel like I talk about Lacey and Sarah all the time in the Happy Thoughts show. I didn't finish listening to their episode last night, but their episode was about how it's possible to change your truth. So I think that really fits in with this too, because there's this big fear of, well, what if I say something and I'm wrong? Or what if I say something and I change my mind, which isn't necessarily about wrongness. It's about just my reality has changed, and therefore what I believe may have changed, and I may have shifted in some way. And that's scary too, because it's especially once you've built a platform, because you build this platform and you have people paying attention to you. So they're paying attention to the things you say and your reasons behind saying them. So coming forward and saying, I've kind of changed things, can be really scary. But
Yeah,
I also think it's a really good opportunity for that transparency that people love, to show your humanity, to show
totally.
that you are an evolving human being who does not have all the answers all the time.
Yeah.
And that, I think people are looking for more of that.
I read an article probably over a year ago, even. My dog's drinking. You can hear that. It was, I believe it was a young woman who was raised in the Westboro Baptist Church. And then
Mm.
as a young adult, actually ended up leaving the church and having a complete change of heart. And like one of the like people who spoke to her just very gently and sort of like brought her around to like realizing that there were other worldviews available to her actually ended up being her husband. And now she like really works hard for totally opposite causes what she used to live, breathe, and drink every day. But like the fact that she's open about it and is like, I made a
Mm-hmm.
mistake and I was hurting people and I, whatever, like owning up to that stuff makes her story so powerful. And like it also shows the power of transformation, right? Like she's able to create
Mm-hmm.
so much more positive, like net good than she could even net negative as sort of a member of this church that like they do a lot of net negative, but like she was one member of it. Now she's like standing out and it's like amazingly powerful, right?
Right.
And so that really sticks out with me. I mean, we don't all need to have a story like as like jarring of a transition as
Right.
that, but like owning up to the mistakes can be like the most
Yeah.
powerful thing we can do.
And that allows us to like sort of hone our voice too. Like, what do you do when you're in that moment where you have to own up to something? How do you approach that? Because odds are that's when you're at your most vulnerable. So that's also when you're going to speak the most authentically.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be about owning up to a mistake. It could just be a shift in your belief
Right.
system, or a shift in like us shifting to talk about thought leadership. That was a shift in our messaging that required us to be very transparent with you guys and talk about things are changing. Here's why. Here's why we're changing our message and why it's important to us, even though you've come to know us for this other stuff. Like,
Yeah.
this is an important piece of it.
And like we're still working it out, so like that's part of why
Totally.
we're here now doing these lives, is because like we're looking for conversation and like we're still feeling it
Yes.
out, and like we anyway, so like just owning up to that. But I think that's allowed some beautiful conversations to
Yeah.
happen, right, that like wouldn't have otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
um
I love this list of fears that James put in here.
mm-hmm.
Fear of rejection, getting in trouble, not working, being hated, being laughed at, not being able to handle it, and being alone.
Totally.
That fear of not being able to handle it, I think, is huge, because there's this underlying, I know I felt this, fear of actually succeeding sometimes. And then being like, oh shit, what did I just create and how do I handle this? And it's so
Yeah.
easy to circumvent that by falling back on sounding like everyone else and be like, well, I don't know why things aren't working. I'm doing all of the things. But when you step out and use your true leadership voice, you can't necessarily fall back on that, because you are going to stand out. And if it succeeds, then you have to deal with the consequences of it succeeding and be like, all right, now I have to deal with this, and I have to make it work, and I have to continue to stand in my truth while making all the nuts and bolts of it work.
Yeah, for sure. I also want to shine a little light on this fear of being hated. And I think a lot of this is grounded in our intention, right? But like when a thought leader or an entrepreneur or an entrepreneurial thought leader is coming at things with the best of intentions, which I know you're absolutely doing, James. I mean, what you're doing is helping people look at a tool that people have sort of co-opted into a marketing like quick fix, as in writing a book. FYI, if those of you guys don't know what he does. And you have turned it into something that's much more meaningful, much more long lasting, much more powerful and
Mm-hmm.
impactful for your clients and for their audience, right? And so you're going at this with like very pure positive intentions, and I think people see that, right? And so the people who would hate that, there may be some people but they're going to be hating it because it's cutting into their profits, or because like it's shining a light on their own shallowness, or whatever it is. Like if you're earning hatred from these people, like it's because they had their heart in the wrong place. So again, I do think the caveat around that is like, we need to be approaching everything with like positive, pure intentions. But like when we do, the hatred like is never going to stand up to like the rapid positive audience building that we're going to have from being
and
so
there will
positive
always
ourselves.
be people who disagree with you. Like, no matter what, you are going to have people who disagree with you. I mean, one of the examples that Marie and I go back to a lot is when we first started talking in this entrepreneur space, we talked a lot about how we didn't agree with the ideal client avatar. To this day, there are many, many, many marketers who rely on the ideal client avatar. And that is something that we kind of hold firm to, that we don't really like the way that it's been co-opted and how it has turned into a paralyzation for a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, something that had the best of intentions that we think has kind of gone off track and become a hurdle more than a help. And yeah, we receive some, people who disagree with us, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because it helps us stand out and it helps us attract the people who do agree with us and the people who have had that experience of being held back by the ideal client avatar who are looking at a different way of approaching things.
Yeah. So in terms of, we've talked about a lot of fear and how that fear sort of like percolates throughout our lives and how it may sort of manifest differently for different people. But one of the ways that is helpful to us for overcoming our own fear is looking back at our values and knowing that like our voice is going to be grounded in our values and that our platform is going to be grounded in them. The other piece of that is the 4-part question series that Adrian has that I really love that I was bringing up yesterday. I don't know that I have it in front of me, but to paraphrase, it's what is the best that could happen from this decision of embracing my voice or whatever it is. You can literally use this framework for any decision you have to make. Like what's the best that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? Will I die from it? Literally, that's one of the questions. And also, is this, if I do go forward with this, is it aligned with my goals? Will it get me closer to my objectives? So if you ask yourself those 4 questions, it kind of helps put some perspective around it a little bit because chances are it probably will not kill you. But also, it can allow you to see what is the best that can happen and help you move forward knowing that like, this may be scary, but it is aligned with my values and it is going to potentially move me closer to my goals and objectives.
Absolutely, yeah. Jen says the goal is to drive change, not perfection.
Totally.
Change can be messy. Exactly. That's so true. And I think that's part of what to kind of think about when you're asking yourself these questions and looking at whether it's worth it to you to step into this voice that might be a little scary sometimes, because what is your goal? That last question of Adrian's that Marie just said, like, does it move me closer to my goal? Do you know what your goal is? And is using your voice going to get you closer to it? And if your goal is to drive change, what does that change look like? And diving into that can kind of help you figure out what you would say around that. And James says, all of this is true, but when you're sensitive to those kinds of feelings, it's still easy to be afraid of receiving them. Absolutely.
100%.
And it's a process, right?
Yeah, this is not a overnight fear factor kind of thing. It doesn't have to be. I mean, some people love to go cold turkey, but I think also just like when we take small intentional steps forward and we allow ourselves to celebrate those steps, even if like the outcome is literally nothing, like even if there's crickets or even if we do get a little hate coming back at us or whatever it is, like saying like, I stood in my truth today, like I'm really proud of myself for doing that. And like however that works for you to celebrate that, whether it's like, going out for a nice dinner or just like telling a friend or just like writing it down in a journal or something where you can look back at it. And like the more we do these things, the more like sort of desensitized we come to and detached we become from the things that we can't control and more attached we come to the process and moving forward in integrity. So it is a process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's also a process to find your voice. So let's talk a little bit about the last little bit in this topic, which is what can you do right now to step into your voice? So there are a lot of things, and honestly, the biggest thing is practice. Like it just comes down to practice and trusting that you will find your voice, that it is a process, but that you are participating in that process every single day. There are some practical things you can do to start stepping into your voice, especially if you feel particularly stuck in the corporate speak or the whatever your trained voice is. But all of those practical steps are secondary to the fact that it really is a process and a practice and something that you need to lean into a little bit every day. And it's also acknowledging those fears and understanding that they are there and making that conscious decision to be like, okay, this fear exists. It's probably not going to go away entirely. Fear is a part of us as humans. We always will feel the fear, and it's just a matter of what we do with it when we feel it. So do we let it make the decisions? I don't know if you guys have read Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic. I love it. It's amazing. And there's this chapter about fear where it talks about how fear is like the passenger you don't want on a road trip. And it tries to take the map, and it tries to tell you where to go, and it tries to tell you what to do, and it keeps yapping in your ear about all the things you don't want to hear. And you have the choice to listen to it and let it be the navigator of your road trip, or to take the map from it and put it in the back seat and tell it to shut up. And it's still a passenger. It's still on the trip with you, but you're taking some of its power away. And I always kind of love that analogy because the fear is going to be hanging out with you, and it's just what you do with it and how you approach it and what role you let it play in your life.
Totally. I really like that analogy a lot. Yeah, I don't know that there's such a thing as fearlessness. And I think that's maybe okay too, right? Because it like helps us see where we have opportunities for growth. It helps us see where we're holding on to stories that may be holding us back. We can kind of use it as a litmus test when we're a little bit more detached. It just takes time. Yeah, no backseat driving. Exactly. Get back there and stay back there. But I love that. And I think it can actually be kind of useful for us. But I think it also takes a lot of time and practice potentially, or at least a mindset shift for us to get to the point where we're able to do that more consistently than not. I'm still working through a lot of it. Like some of my fears, I'm like, that's silly. Like nothing bad's going to happen. And some of my fears, I'm like, this is the worst thing ever. So I think it like depends on the fear too.
Like legit guys, you don't know how many times one of us will write something to post like on Facebook or something and then be like, Marie, can you look at this before I post it? Because I'm terrified to post it and tell me if it's okay and I'm not going to die, right?
I did this last week.
I did it the week before. Like it happens all the time. And that could be something too. It's like, who is a safe person that you can experiment with or play with or test your voice out with? Like I trust that Marie would tell me if my post going out to Facebook would end up with, I don't know, people throwing rocks through my window. Like I trust that she would be able to tell me when to cool my jets.
Or like, are you hiding back? Like, are you holding back from you? Because I know you so well. I can also say like, I don't know if you're like actually really stepping into your truth. I feel like you're like poking your truth a little bit here, right? So it goes both ways.
Just poking it with a stick.
So yes, I think, this is part of why like we always love having some kind of like mastermind or community. Now that we've like tasted that, we're like, I need that all the time, because they do help us stay accountable. So like finding a safe space, we want to be a safe space here for you guys. So like, if you're testing out stuff or if you have questions about things, like post it, PM us, whatever. Totally. Like we want to be here and provide that like non-judgmental space. But like we know that's not everywhere, right? So like find those spaces that work for you. And a lot of it too is just like in identifying your values and identifying what you hold true to. And so that's a huge piece of it, right? Because like we can ask that question about anything. Like I was saying, those 4 questions, but that one about like, does this get me closer to my values and my objectives? Like, how do you know if you haven't assessed what those are? Like you were saying, Jessie.
Right, totally. So what you can do right now to step into your voice, one is practice and trust the process. The other is to find people that you feel comfortable practicing with. If you don't feel comfortable doing it in the public venue at this time, So like, for example, when you join our implementation program that we have going on right now, that program is designed specifically to provide a safe space for people to practice their messaging, so that their messaging is not just helping them with their thought leadership platform, but is also helping them be comfortable talking about the things that they are most passionate about talking about, so they can create the change that they need. So when you find that safe community, it allows you to practice before you put it public.
Totally.
The other thing you can do is you can create your own word bank. And so this is a little bit more on the practical side of things and less on the just practice and trust yourself. But if you're the sort of person who needs structure around your voice, we recommend creating a word bank for your business. Just like you have a brand guide for your business, you have colors for your business, you should also have words for your business, because words make up the brand and they make what is really memorable for your audience and for you to know that these are your values. This is the way you talk about your values and things like that. So that's one of the things that you can do in order to hone down to, okay, these are the words and phrases that my business sort of works around, and that helps describe what I do within my business.
Totally. So we actually have a guide for you guys. And before I tell you what that is, I just want to, James is always so witty. Sometimes the truth pokes you back, which is a good sign. I think you're totally right. So we have a resource for you guys if you're interested in this whole word bank for your business. It's like a branded word guide so that you can fall back on it as you're
Brand
practicing.
Your Voice Guide.
Exactly. It's called the Brand Your Voice Guide. You can get it for free on our website at northstarmessaging.com/brand voice. That's all one word smushed together, brand voice. We'll put that in the comments.
Putting it in the comments.
And I'll also tweak the header text when we get off of this to mention it. But yes, would love for you guys to take advantage of that resource. Thanks for posting that, Jessie. And if you have questions about it, feel free to ask us. But it's been really helpful, I think, in the past for people who are pivoting or who are still working through owning their voice and their messaging. You're so welcome, Jen. Okay, I think that's it for talking about voice. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
So that means we're done with our first month of thought leadership stuff, which is super exciting. I have absolutely adored the conversations this month and the participation from you guys adding to it, because I think you guys, in being present for this, whether you're watching live or on the replay, have helped us solidify what we believe around thought leadership and how we want to show up in this space. So thank you for being a part of the conversation. Next month, we are going to talk a little bit more about this differentiation between an entrepreneur and a thought leader, and we're going to be focusing on healthy habits of thought leaders. So if you are a thought leader, or really a leader of any type, but specifically a thought leader, what are the healthy habits? What are the habits around that leadership that allow you to step into that role in a way that really lets you build a platform without having as many of those fears maybe, or having those fears be so strong, or with getting burnt out, without feeling like a fraud. There are a whole bunch of things that can come up that if you can start establishing some healthy habits as a thought leader, you can maybe prevent a little bit.
Exactly. So we're kicking off, a week from today, another month of hanging out here in Facebook. We will be doing 2 Facebook Lives and another roundtable in which we're inviting all of you to come hang out with us in Zoom. We will not be recording that call, so if you want to get in on it, just attend live if you can. And then we'll have one more sort of final Jessie and me Facebook Live roundup to pull it all together. So, all right, if you guys have questions or if there's any sort of things, yes, shiny captain. So if there's anything you guys want to know about healthy habits, as we pull together the materials for the next month, just let us know, and we can look at integrating that into what we're talking about. But thank you guys so much, for being here today.
Yeah, I'm cutting you off because you definitely want to come to next week's live stream, because in addition to talking about healthy habits, in addition to talking about healthy habits for thought leaders, we are going to be making an announcement of something that we are putting together for you guys that we are super excited about. Like, seriously, it totally derailed half our day yesterday.
That's true. In the best way.
I was walking through the grocery store voxering Marie about this stuff. Like, I'm super excited.
Yes.
We're going to be announcing it next week during the live stream, though. So make sure you show up for next Wednesday's conversation on healthy habits for thought leaders.
If we can say it. Okay, thanks guys so much for being here today. If you want to get notified of these Facebook Lives, if you haven't already, just go to Thought Leaders Think Tank, go to the events tab, and you will be able to say, yes, I want to attend these events. They're recurring, so you'll get a weekly reminder. All right, thanks guys so much. Until next time.
Talk to you later.